snatch block, KFI mount in black, and the mounting hardware. Mount that comes with the Badlands winch, Badlands 3500 winch, and the included accessories for the Badlands winch. Going on a Wolverine X2. Alright, in there. Easy so far. KFI plate, the winch on top of it. What we had to do was get under here, remove the plastic skid plate, 6 torque bolts, forget the size, and then we look under here, so we're looking down, and rotate up. You see the winch plate in there, we got bolts going to it. It just slides into place. I kept the bolts loose in the back, and this 3,500 pound winch just slides right in the side, either left or right. And now we're going to start bolting it up. So you got 2 bolts holding the winch mount right there, right in between those 2 brackets above the control arm where that bolt goes through. Same thing on the opposite side, and we'll start bolting down the winch. Okay, so we're under the machine right now. We're going to turn the camera up and see if I can zoom out. You've got these 4 bolts going into the Badlands winch. Not that one. So 2 right here. This will be your view if the skid plate is off. These are on the front of the winch, and then if you look back a little bit, these 2 go through the back of the KFI plate. So you've got 2 that go through the bumper-ish, bumper, through the KFI plate into the front of the Badlands winch. And then on the back, you've just got 2 bolts that go through the KFI plate into the back of the Badlands winch. Moving. Okay, so it's tightened down a little bit. Bolts are not fully tight. Thank you to Yamaha for actually making it so there's enough space. You can get a 14 socket around those front ones because of the cutouts. It was pretty easy. There are some little inserts, it seems, that the front 2 screw into, actually all 4 screw into when you're going into the winch. So I just had a little screwdriver handy to stick in the hole and fray it up, make it nice and straight shot. Obviously put those 4 in by hand, loosely tightened it. And I don't think I mentioned it before, this is my personal opinion, I'm no expert, but I just loosely mounted all the bolts just to get everything in place. And then I just tightened up once everything was in place. And I'm still not fully tight. I'm not going to do that until I'm just about all done. So that's it so far. Pretty easy. Next step was pretty easy. This is the roller lead. 2 bolts on the front of the mount. Right there and right there. Front and back. Very easy. Also 14 mil like everything else. Moving on to the next part. Just took the hood off. Gonna try and figure out how, who, when, where to do the wiring. So, winch is mounted up with roller lead bolts. Other than the roller lead, still needs to be tightened up a little bit, but we'll get to that. Now to find the wiring solution for the engine bay and the. Okay, so let's see where I'm at. So last I left off, I was just taking off the top here, the hood, and what I've done, I found that I want to take this Harbor Freight solenoid, which fell on the ground, and mount it right in here. I checked it with the battery and everything else. The cables will fit nicely. This seems to be where I want it. So what I'm going to have to do is drill 2 holes to support the screws, which you can see on either side of it. You can see how it has those 2 brackets that the screws are going to have to go through. So that being a solid piece of plastic, it's going to need 2 holes. Well, what I did in order to get some space so I could get some tools in there was very easy. Pulled out the battery and cut 2 zip ties. That's all it was. These little relays just kind of clip on there. So even though this looks like a giant mess, it was a giant mess like that before I cut the zip ties. So you're going to take off a zip tie here and cut a zip tie that's over here holding these all together, and just kind of flop these out of the way. I'm no expert, so you can lambash me if you want for that. Let's see. So
easy way to pull the battery out because there was no handle on it. The handle's actually kind of what hold it down. I wouldn't say that's a handle. I just threw 2 zip ties through the top terminals. Helps you give you a pull on it. So now I'm going to get some holes going into the fender and mount up that solenoid. Okay, so here's the update. First thing I learned, probably might have been worth it to buy the Yamaha install kit just because the Harbor Freight wiring makes this a pain unless you've got the crimping tools to adjust the wire lengths or make your own wires or get your own wires made up. I say that because the blue and yellow wires were about the same length.
So they're coming off of the side of the winch. I routed them up
Behind the fender, up through the headlight housing, and up through the little open hole right here. They go to the solenoid. They're about the only easy fit. I know these colors are mixed match just because blue is still going to blue, yellow is still going to yellow. I thought they were different length. That's neither here nor there. Second issue that we ran into is the actual terminal sizes on these wires. And if you notice, if you have the Harbor Freight wiring kit, the little relay here actually has a little patch wire that goes to it. And the patch wire is supposed to go from the terminal to the relay, and then you run your big power cord from the relay to the solenoid. The issue there was that the patch cable is 2 different sizes. See here on the negative, and we'll get to that in a second. This was originally the patch cable right here, and one side is big enough for the battery terminal, which is a different size than the solenoid. So that became an issue because you could not just put the patch cable on this because it had a terminal size for this. So what I did here was remove the patch cable entirely and just screwed the end of the relay onto the power terminal, which accomplishes the same thing without the patch cable. Then you have this big excess of wire that I'm going to have to find out how I want to tuck and try and make look organized, and that goes right to the battery right here. So in a perfect world, which I will do eventually, is get some wires made up so I can make this nice and clean. The second issue was the same thing with the negative cord. The negative had on both sides terminal ends that were big enough just for the terminals on the solenoid. Again, down here on the battery it's bigger. So what I was able to do is take that patch cable that I wound up not discarding and putting the large end of the patch cable, which is usually on the circuit, on the battery. On the relay on the battery, and the small end right where it was supposed to be on the solenoid. So essentially my patch cable became my negative, the rest of it became my positive, and the blue and yellow are the blue and yellow. Definitely not too pretty. Going to try and clean it up a little bit and then get wires remade later, but for now this should work. I'm going to test it in a minute once I hook up the controller. So in short, to summarize, blue and yellow are fine. Routing it down through the headlight, behind the fender, and to the side of this winch, that was no problem. For the negative and the positive, I'm calling it a patch cable. If you want to use the smaller cable on the side of the circuit, on the relay that comes off the relay and attaches to the battery, I use that as my negative cable, so just use that to go black to black. They don't need to be the same color. There's just a cable. And then the larger portion connected directly with the relay to the positive terminal, and then goes to the red or the positive on the solenoid. Once I try and clean up these wires a little bit, zip tie everything back together in its proper wiring locations, see how this winds up looking, and actually first we'll probably just test it and make sure it's good before we start putting everything in its final spots. Alright, getting to the conclusion of this hack job, further regretting not just getting the Yamaha kit. So, was able to run the blue and the yellow wires down the same way they were. Little wire come here right off the negative. Positive, just ran the extra slack back. I'm going to kind of zip tie that off, make that a little tight. I ran a little bit of it under the space under there in the ECU just to hold it in place. Definitely doesn't look factory, but does the trick. You know, the wires are kind of zip tied off, cleaned up down here. The wiring for that's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I went over that, but you'll have ends like these. This is the switch that this is the ending for the switch that you can mount in the vehicle. I didn't use that. I just used the port for the wired, I guess, switch, the extended switch, whatever you want to call it. The piece that you can walk away with, used to control the winch, not the vehicle mounted part, which you can actually mount both of them. That is a little feature that they have with the wiring here. So essentially you have a yellow and a black and a green. That's going to plug into a black and a green there. And for the vehicle one, that's it. That's all you got, with the exception being a little red wire down there, that if you're mounting that switch in the vehicle, you need to find where that red wire, you need to test some wires, find an ignition on according to the instructions, and wire it to that. If you don't want it to be ignition on and you want to be able to use it even if the vehicle's off, just wire that somehow directly to a positive somewhere, and that ought to work. In my case, I just had to put it comes with a white wire, which I connected to negative, a white wired terminal, which just went onto the negative terminal, and a red one, which went onto the positive terminal, plus those same two plugs I showed you. Then ran that wire back under, and came under here, and goes out through an existing wiring hole, where it will then be zip tied up. It goes under the fender and pops out right here. I zip tied this just because, well, everything else is a hack. Why not this? And also that way, forbid I roll over or do something, even if I did find or make up a bracket to bolt it to, this is fine because it's got a little flexibility, and I kind of wanted that just in case I roll it or need to get to it from a different angle, whatever my reasoning is. And you just unplug it or plug it in there. Comes over to the cord, and it works. So that's about it. Now is just the finishing up part, which everything's already run to the best of what I can do. I'm just going to replace some factory zip ties in the factory locations, and try and clean up some of the wiring a little bit more as I lock it all down. Then just make sure all the wires underneath are good. I'm going to retighten, check all my terminals, check all my connections, make sure everything's good. Put that skid plate back on the bottom, which is very easy, a few bolts, and it's all done. Alright, test fitted, put the hood on top of it just to make sure all these wires here on the left side weren't now bulging up or causing a problem, and they don't seem to be. Hood seems to close alright. So that's it. That's the Harbor Freight KFI winch install. Can't say I'm too happy with the wiring, but honestly, for $100 on sale for the winch, $50 for the mount, it's a $150 install. If I get the cables made up or go get something done like that, it might only be 20, 25 more bucks. So for 175 bucks, you can have a pretty good, pretty clean working winch install. Alright, so this is completed. Cleaned up, tucked up the wiring as nice as possible. Tried to make it look somewhat okay. Come down here, everything's tightened up. Don't forget to tighten up connections. Make sure you put the boots on before you do that, because you're going to need those. Skid plate back on. I have a little snatch block in here just because, well, I don't want to bring tools to put it on out on the trail, and it's not a good one that slides and opens up easily, so I gotta do it with bolts. Moving on, don't forget, I also didn't tighten down the winch or the winch mount until I was really 100% done. Everything fit, everything was good, so snug that up. Same thing, all the connections tightened up, battery holder tightened up, top of the airbox lid back on, everything done. Wires tucked, cleaned up as best as possible. Everything from up here where I mounted my switch to down here where you can kind of tell this is the wire that is coming in from up top. And yeah, so that's all of it. Everything's done, and just hope this helps somebody.